Flat, lifeless shadows can ruin even the most beautiful drawing, making them oh so boring. But with the right approach, they can transform your work into something rich, dimensional, and alive. Hi, I'm Jeanette. I'm a full-time artist working in colored pencils, drawing large-scale portraits and florals. But no matter what I'm drawing, shadows play a huge role in what I'm doing, bringing my artwork to life. They give weight to skin and curve to petals and make things feel real. But you don't need to draw big to get to know how to work with shadows. So today, we're going to draw this bright little frog. Its green, oranges, and whites are perfect for learning how light plays across color, how reflections bounce, and how form takes shape. I'm going to show you 3 key techniques that I use every day in my own artwork, using color temperature, layering with depth, and working with reflected light. And underneath it all, the essentials: value, contrast, and form. And an easy little bonus tip at the very end, it's going to make your drawing leap right off the page. So thanks so much for joining me, and let's jump right into this. You'll see my colors and pressure notes on the top left-hand corner. I'm going to be using Strathmore mixed media as my paper, with polychromos and luminance as my pencils. But whatever brand you use, you can follow along and adapt. Here's a quick look at the final drawn image. Note the rich tonal contrast we'll aim to capture. So let's dive in with the outline and talk shadows. Okay, so I'm going to focus on a few essential parts of shadows, and we're just going to keep it really straightforward. Shadows on subjects kind of fall into 2 main types. One of them is called form shadows. These kind of occur where the subject blocks the light, creating a shadow on the surface, like in these photos. If the surface is flat, the shadow is solid. If curved, it transitions from dark to light, sometimes, but not always. So you can see in these examples that even with a flat surface, the shadow can actually transition out to lighter. And the reason why that's happening is because there's other light hitting the shadow on the other side. That's actually creating a little mix or a little bit of lightness as it transitions out from the dark area around the subject. That's what's going on. So the second type of shadow is called a cast shadow. These appear when the subject casts a shadow onto another surface, influenced by surrounding light and reflective light. And generally the way that a cast shadow works is when it's closer to the subject, is about the darkest area or the darkest shadow that you're going to find on a subject. Again, not all the rules apply, remember, so do look carefully at your subject. In this example, we'll imagine our frog sitting on a white table outside with natural sunlight hitting it. Okay, so we're going to start with tip number 1, the cool color collaboration. Our first tip is to use cooler tones in the shadows. In realism, shadows play a crucial role in creating depth and defining form. For our frog, with its vibrant green, oranges, and whites, shadows are our secret ingredients for turning flat shapes into fully realized forms. And that's where the element of art comes in. We are creating a form here, and a form is one of the elements of art, something I like to focus on in my videos. Shadows are shaped not only by light directly hitting the subject, but also by surrounding light and reflections from nearby objects. When I choose to use a cool color in my shadows, there's a reason behind this choice. Let's explore why. I know that shadows are influenced by temperature of light and objects around them, so it's essential to be observant when capturing these effects. For instance, if I consider a frog sitting on a white table outside, we can break that down into different elements that affect the shadow. We see that the shadow areas of a frog are darker where the sunlight is blocked. Here's where it gets really interesting. The blue sky above adds a cool influence on the shadowed side because there's no longer any sunlight hitting it, and then sunlight is a little bit warmer than the blue sky, lending a cooler tone to these shadow areas. But what if you're indoors, away from sunlight, and all the light and surfaces and walls are warm tones and temperatures? In that case, the color of the artificial light and the surrounding space will affect the shadow temperatures, right? But for me, as an artist, we have 2 options. We can either replicate the observed color temperature, or we can be a little bad and, I don't know, maybe add some cool colors to create what I call the dynamic cool color collaboration. So for me, it's about mixing color temperatures so I can enhance depth and interest in my artwork, making it more engaging. There's plenty of information out there about creating shadows, and many artists have their own approaches. Ultimately, the choice is going to be up to you. But for our little frog, I'm going to be doing it my way, and I love that. Our first big tip starts with laying down base shadows using cool tone colors. That's tip number 1, cool color collaboration. As mentioned earlier, the shadow color depends on the surrounding light source, the main color of the subject, and how it blends into the shadows and any reflected light color. In our case, I've decided to stick to a cool color as I'm trying to enhance the overall dynamic of the subject. We can do this by changing the color temperature between shadow and light. Let's start with the green areas on our frog. Instead of grabbing a dark green pencil or a green pencil in general right away, I'm going to start with a medium cool blue as our shadow base. So why blue? Since blue is an adjacent color to green on the color wheel, it's a great place to start. It's all about, again, that cool color collaboration, right? I'm keeping my pressure light as I'm laying down this medium blue. As I finish off with the medium blue, I'm going to add in a lighter blue on top of that. You'll see how this layering is going to add depth when I start adding the green a little bit later. It's going to create a much more three-dimensional effect. Now, let's move to the orange spots. While this area is warmer in terms of the orange color, I'm still using a cool color for the shadows. Notice how the red-brown base contrasts with the blue that I've just put down. Each shadow color helps define the frog's shape. I'm darkening the edges of the shapes and blending lighter towards the center. See how the shadows transitions from light to dark? This technique emphasizes form, and in the finished frog, the colors will appear lighter near the light source, which is perfect. Next, I'll add a medium orange over what I've just created, blending it into the red-brown base. I'm applying it lightly to avoid overpowering the image. Remember, I love layering lots of colors. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of working with colored pencils. As we move on to the white areas, we want to maintain the lightness of that white. We don't want to overpower it. So I'm going to be using a subtle lavender gray for the shadows. If you don't have a lavender gray, you can use a cool gray. Light colors, like white, require delicate shadows to avoid looking too heavy. Just a touch of this lavender gray is enough to suggest that there's a shadow without stealing the spotlight from the white. Now we're seeing form, and the frog is coming to life. Using the technique from the green, orange, and the white areas, I'll now enhance these sections by adding a little bit more darker colors to build the depth. For deeper shadow tones, I'll use a dark blue for the green areas and dark red or burgundy for the orange sections. These shadow choices transform our frog from flat to full of life. Okay, tip number 2, building shadows using values and layering. Let's dive deeper into the process of building shadows. picking up from tip number 1, where we use cool tones in the shadows, I'm going to start by adding color to the white area on the frog. Shadows, as we discussed earlier, aren't just about understanding the science of light. In art, shadows are a creative tool. With colored pencils, we use them to define form and depth by transitioning smoothly from light to dark, what we call values. These values are the foundation of realistic drawings. In colored pencil work, shadows are created by layering colors. This layering builds values that turn a basic flat shape into a three-dimensional form. So let's take a look at some value scales. Simply put, it's a gradient of a color that goes from light to dark. Each color has its own value range. What we see there is white on one side and black or a darker color on the other. It's clear how to achieve light values with our colors, but how do we achieve darker tones, you might ask? Can't we just add black? Well, the answer is no, it's probably not a great idea, and we don't really want to rely on black. So why is that? Because black can muddy your colors. Adding it to other colors can actually really dull them down and make them look lifeless. So instead, achieving that value range means layering other colors aside from black to create depth while keeping the tones vibrant and dynamic. So, for example, in tip number 1, we built shadows in the green areas by layering blues. Blue is an analogous color to green, and if you use a dark blue, it would build those dark values we need and want to achieve in your artwork. If your goal is to keep the cool undertones in the same color family, called harmonious colors, using this method is fantastic. This is a great way to add depth without dulling the green that we're trying to add on top. So why is this? Analogous colors complement each other. They're colors that achieve harmony, as I've said before, and they work beautifully with each other. So there's another way to achieve values with colors, and that's through layering complementary colors on your subject. Complementary colors, like in this color wheel, are colors that sit opposite each other on the color wheel. Typically, these colors, when layered together, create kind of a brown or grayish color. If this grays up a color, you can ask yourself, well, why do we want to do that? You may want to use this combination of colors with each other to achieve a value range on a subject that is more muted. What I find really fascinating is the ability to be able to use a variety of different colors to achieve value ranges on different types of subjects, from super bright like this frog to more muted tones like these vases. Going back to our frog and why we use the blues, this gave the shadows a cooler undertone, adding depths without dulling the greens that we're going to be layering on top. It also created the darker value range that we needed. When you create your own artwork, consider using a similar method instead of black. Now, let's shift to the green section of the frog. I started with a medium blue layer in tip number 1 to create cool undertones, then followed with a lighter blue for midtones, and after that I used a dark indigo blue for the shadows. What I'm doing here is adding a bright green pencil over all the areas I applied the blue shadow colors. This green is the main frog color, and it's the color we really want to see pop and stand out. And it unifies the area, letting the underlying shadows shine through. Again, I'm using light pressure, just grazing the paper. This method helps build color gradually, adding richness without flattening the depth I've already created. The next color in our layering for shadows is the orange. In this case, I'm using a medium orange over all the areas of the frog that I first covered in tip 1 with the red, brown, and the burgundy. Like with the green, I'm keeping the layer of orange light and layering it over the entire area. As I work, you'll notice that even small changes in pressure or color choice can dramatically impact the results. In my professional practice, I often spend months layering and building shadows on large-scale portraits or botanical works. Here, with this simple object, you can see how the same principles apply, just on a smaller, more manageable scale, done special for you. Shadows in these areas are critical for defining form. By layering cool tones, we've started to create depth. Now, let's add more complexity, enhancing the colors, adding some warmth in the areas where the colors lighten, and continue to build up the layers to create more shadow and form. For the green areas, I continue layering. I'm going to build up the warmth of the frog by adding some mustard yellow, a color that in itself has some black added into it. This color is warm, and I'm only using it in the areas where the light hits the frog and not in the shadows. This is where tip number 1 comes into play as we balance out the colors and the cool color collaboration takes place. That's fantastic. A balance between cool and warm is essential. A good starting ratio is 70% cool, 30% warm, or you can switch the opposite. So it could be 70% warm and 30% cool. After the mustard yellow, I'll add some medium cadmium yellow in the highlight areas, coming in right beside that with a more mossy green to transition between the warmth of the yellows and the coolness of the blue greens. Next, I'll layer dark, cool green into the shadows, blending it into the rest of the drawing. I'll finish off the green areas with 2 bright greens. They keep the vibrancy of the frog going, and adding another pass of bright green over the top brightens the midtones and ties the layers together. For darker areas, I'll layer more indigo blue, using slightly increased pressure to deepen the values without overwhelming the color underneath. This step is all about fine-tuning, adjusting the values to bring out the frog's form while maintaining the richness of the colors. Finally, let's look at the results so far. The frog's green and white areas now have a clear sense of form and dimension thanks to the careful layering of values. This layering process gives the shadow dimension, making them feel more natural and lifelike. Now we're ready for the final tip. Well, that's before the bonus, of course. And this one's really a game changer. Reflective light shows up within shadows, adding that extra layer of realism and making the subject pop. When shadows fall, they're very rarely uniform. Reflective light bounces into the shadows from nearby surfaces, even in darker areas, like these examples. I started with a medium cadmium yellow to add light to the folds closest to the white surface and the orange feet. This is on the white parts of the frog, where you're going to see a lot of reflective light come in. This subtle touch completely transformed the shadows, adding a lifelike quality. It's really cool, actually, because it looks like light's bouncing up onto the frog. Adding orange and green reflective light enhances the effect further, giving the frog a natural dynamic appearance. As I finalize the values through layering, I continue to add more pressure and build up multiple layers of colors. I'm working with a combination of dark indigo and red purple burgundy to enhance the shadows across the drawing, carefully blending these tones together. In the eye area, I use a mix of dark oranges and black to create solid, rich layers that add a shiny appearance. I then finish this section with a medium orange to complete the final touches. Building shadows with values and layering is a skill that takes practice, but the results are always worth it. By considering how light interacts with your subject and using colors thoughtfully, you can create depth and realism in your drawings. It's all about gradual transitions, patience, and control. And here's a little bonus tip to finish off your artwork with a bang: those cast shadows. Cast shadows are typically the darkest parts of a drawing, making them perfect for grounding your subject and giving it that extra presence on the page. Let's add a cast shadow under a frog to make it look like it's sitting right on the surface. Notice how dark I'm making this shadow. It is the darkest part, and I am using black. This strong contrast between the frog and the cast shadow gives our drawing that extra pop. It anchors our frog friend onto the surface and makes the image leap off the page. So, just quickly in a recap. First, we chose shadow colors. We decided on using cool tones because I wanted to create something a bit more dynamic. So remember, look at your subject, and then you as the artist have to figure out what color temperature you want to use in your shadows. Do pay attention to what your subject is telling you. Then after that, we looked at tip number 2 on how to create more shadows, building values with layers. And finally, we added reflective light to our white areas, enhancing the frog's form and adding lifelike depth. Finally, with our bonus tip on the cast shadows, we grounded our frog with those darkest darks for that serious pop. So thanks so much for joining me on this colorful journey. I hope these tips help you add depth, realism, and that wow factor to your own drawings. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more colored pencil tips, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next. Until next time, keep creating and have fun with those shadows.